The hotel room phone shrieked at 2:13 a.m., cutting through my dreams like a rusty blade. I fumbled for the receiver, my mind still foggy from the conference dinner's cheap wine. "Dean, this is Mrs. Henderson from next door." Her voice carried that particular tone neighbors use when they're about to ruin your life. "I hate to bother you, but Selah never came home tonight." I sat up in the scratchy hotel sheets, suddenly wide awake. "What do you mean she never came home?" "Her car's not in the driveway. The porch light's been on all night, and I saw her leave yesterday around noon. She usually waves when she sees me watering my flowers, but—" Mrs. Henderson trailed off, probably realizing she sounded like the neighborhood spy she actually was. My wife Selah, the woman who planned everything down to the minute, who set 3 alarms just to wake up on time, who never forgot to lock the doors or turn off the coffee maker, that Selah just didn't come home. "Maybe she's working late," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were hollow. Selah's law firm was demanding, but she always called. Always. "At 2 a.m? Dean, I'm worried something might have happened." After I hung up, I stared at the ceiling of the generic conference room hotel, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. 3 years of marriage, and Selah had never once failed to come home without calling. Not once. I grabbed my laptop and logged into our home security system. The cameras I'd installed last year after the break-ins on Maple Street suddenly felt like the smartest investment I'd ever made. The footage loaded slowly over the hotel's terrible Wi-Fi, but when it finally appeared, my stomach dropped. There, clear as day on the timestamp from 6:47 a.m. this morning, was a man I didn't recognize walking out of my front door. Tall, lean, wearing yesterday's clothes and yesterday's confidence. He punched in the gate code like he'd done it 100 times before, climbed into a beat-up Honda Civic, and drove away. The gate code I'd given only to Selah. I rewound the footage, watching it again and again. The man moved through my house, my yard, my life like he owned it, like he belonged there more than I did. "Well," I muttered to the empty hotel room, "isn't this interesting?" I closed the laptop and lay back down, but sleep was impossible now. Instead, I stared at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere I'd never been, and I started planning. The conference ended in 18 hours. Plenty of time to figure out exactly who this guy was and exactly what I was going to do about it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The drive back from the conference felt like the longest 4 hours of my life. I'd spent the morning sessions pretending to care about quarterly projections and market analysis while my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic texts from Selah. "Where are you? Mrs. Henderson said she called you? This is ridiculous, Dean. Call me back. I can explain everything." That last one made me laugh out loud in the hotel parking lot. She could explain everything. How generous of her. I'd done my homework during the boring seminars. A reverse image search of the security footage gave me nothing, but a little social media detective work on Selah's accounts revealed some interesting patterns. Likes and comments from someone named Lyle Denvers, going back months. Photos at restaurants I'd never been to, tagged with locations but no companions mentioned. Lyle Denvers. Even his name sounded like a mistake. I pulled into our driveway at 3:30 p.m., noting that Selah's BMW was parked perfectly in her spot, as if she'd never left, as if last night had never happened. She met me at the door, and I had to admit she looked good. Selah always looked good. It was part of her arsenal, part of how she moved through the world collecting victories. Today she wore her concerned wife expression, the one she'd perfected during my father's funeral last year. "Dean, thank goodness you're home. Mrs. Henderson has been spreading the most ridiculous rumors." I set my suitcase down and looked at her. Really looked at her. "Rumors?" "She thinks something happened to me just because I stayed at Cassie's last night. You know how she gets after her book club meetings. We lost track of time, and I didn't want to drive home after the wine." Cassie. Her best friend since law school, the real estate agent with the perfect house and the perfect marriage and the perfect ability to provide alibis when needed. "You stayed at Cassie's." "Yes, I texted you, but you must have been in those meetings." She moved closer, putting her hand on my arm. "I'm sorry if you were worried." I nodded slowly. "Show me the text." "What?" "The text you sent me. Show me." For just a second, her mask slipped. Just a fraction, but I saw it. The calculation behind her eyes, the quick mental scramble, then the mask was back, along with a small laugh. "Dean, you're being paranoid. Check your phone." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages. Sure enough, there it was. A text from Selah sent at 11:47 p.m. Staying at Cassie's tonight. Wine got the better of us. See you tomorrow. Except I'd been checking my phone obsessively since Mrs. Henderson's call, and that text definitely hadn't been there this morning. Huh? I said. Must have come through late. You know how the service is at that hotel. She smiled, relieved. Exactly. Now, how was your conference? I told her about the conference. I told her about the boring presentations and the terrible food and the colleague who'd had too much to drink at the networking event. I told her everything except what I'd learned about Lyle Denvers, about the security footage, about the fact that I'd already called in a favor with my buddy at the phone company to get detailed records of her text messages. That night, we had dinner like nothing had happened. We watched the news like nothing had happened. We went to bed like nothing had happened. But as I lay there listening to Selah's carefully controlled breathing, I was already planning my next move, because something had definitely happened, and now it was my turn. The beauty of working in project management is that you develop certain skills: organization, attention to detail, the ability to track multiple moving parts simultaneously, and most importantly, the patience to gather all the information before making your move. I started small. Monday morning, I checked our joint credit card statements online. Dinner for two at Romano's last Tuesday, when I was working late and Selah claimed she'd grabbed a salad at home. A hotel charge from 3 weeks ago, the same night she'd said she was at her sister's birthday party in Milwaukee. Gas station purchases in parts of town she had no reason to visit. The pattern was there, clear as daylight once you knew what to look for. I called my buddy Jake at the boxing gym where I'd been training since college. Jake had connections everywhere, the kind of guy who knew a guy who knew a guy. Within an hour, I had Lyle Denver's address, employment history, and a fascinating collection of details about his financial situation. Turned out Lyle was a freelance photographer who specialized in wedding photography and apparently married women. His last 3 relationships had ended when the women's husbands found out. He was currently 2 months behind on rent and driving a car that should have been repossessed weeks ago. A real winner, my Selah. Tuesday evening, I suggested we grab dinner at Romano's. Romano's? Selah looked up from her laptop, surprised. That's kind of upscale for a Tuesday night. I had a good week. Thought we could celebrate. She hesitated for just a moment. Actually, I'm not really in the mood for Italian. How about that new sushi place? Come on, you love Romano's. Didn't you just eat there recently? No, I haven't been to Romano's in months. I nodded and smiled. Sushi sounds great. Over California rolls and sake, I casually mentioned running into Mrs. Henderson that afternoon. She said the strangest thing. She thought she saw a man leaving our house early Thursday morning. Isn't that weird? Selah's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. Mrs. Henderson sees a lot of things. Most of them exist only in her imagination. That's what I told her. I said the only man who comes out of our house in the morning is me, and I was at the conference. Must have been the mailman or something. Must have been. But her appetite was gone, and she spent the rest of dinner checking her phone. That night, I upgraded our home security system. More cameras, better resolution, motion sensors, the works. I told Selah it was because of the recent break-ins in the neighborhood. Don't you think this is a little excessive? She asked, watching me install a camera that had a perfect view of the driveway. Better safe than sorry. Besides, the insurance company gives us a discount for having a comprehensive system. She didn't argue, but I caught her staring at the cameras with an expression I couldn't quite read. Wednesday, I took a long lunch and drove to Lyle's apartment complex. It was exactly what I'd expected, a rundown collection of buildings that had seen better decades, with cars that barely ran parked in spaces marked with fading paint. I didn't see Lyle, but I saw his Honda Civic, the same one from my security footage. I took pictures of the license plate, the apartment number, the building layout. Information was power, and I was building an arsenal. Thursday evening, Selah announced she was going out with Cassie again. Book club? I asked innocently. No, just dinner. Girl time, you know how it is. Of course, have fun. I kissed her goodbye and watched her drive away. Then I settled in front of my laptop with a cup of coffee and waited. She didn't go to Cassie's house. The GPS tracker I'd installed in her car, a perfectly legal device for a vehicle I co-owned, showed her driving across town to a motel I'd never heard of. The Starlight Inn, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. I sat there staring at the little dot on my screen, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak, exactly. It was more like the moment when you realize you've been playing a game where everyone else knew the rules except you. But now, I knew the rules, and I was ready to start playing. Friday morning, I called in sick to work. I'd never used a personal day for surveillance before, but there's a first time for everything. I parked across the street from the Starlight Inn at 10 a.m., armed with coffee, a newspaper, and a camera with a telephoto lens. The motel looked even worse in daylight. Peeling paint, a neon sign that probably hadn't worked since the Clinton administration, and the kind of parking lot where you watched where you stepped. At 10:47, Selah's BMW pulled into the lot. She parked in the back, away from the street, and walked quickly to room 237. She didn't knock. She had a key. 15 minutes later, Lyle's Honda arrived. He parked next to her car and jogged up the stairs like a man who was already late for an appointment. I took pictures. Lots of pictures. They stayed for 2 hours. When they finally emerged, Selah looked around nervously before getting in her car. Lyle waited until she'd left before following, maintaining a careful distance. Professional cheaters, both of them. I drove home and uploaded the photos to my computer, then printed copies. High resolution, time-stamped, absolutely clear. Then I sat at my kitchen table and planned my next move. The direct approach had never been my style, but some situations called for directness. I was waiting in the living room when Selah came home at 6:30, carrying takeout bags from the Thai place downtown. "Thought I'd grab dinner," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You seemed stressed this week." "Thoughtful of you. How was your day?" "Busy. Depositions all morning, client meetings all afternoon. You know how it is." I nodded and pulled out my phone. Funny thing happened today. I got a call from Jerry Matthews. You remember Jerry from college? He's a private investigator now. Selah froze in the middle of unpacking the takeout containers. "Oh?" "Yeah, he was telling me about this case he's working on, cheating spouse investigation. He showed me some of the photos he'd taken." I swiped through the images on my phone. Amazing what people do when they think nobody's watching. I turned the phone toward her. The photo was crystal clear, Selah and Lyle walking out of room 237, his hand on her lower back, her laughing at something he'd said. The takeout container slipped from her hands, spilling pad thai across the kitchen floor. "Dean, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You're a lawyer. Explaining things is what you do." I stood up, pocketing the phone. "But I'm not interested in explanations right now. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" She stared at me, and I could see her mind racing, trying to find the angle, the argument, the way to turn this around. It was fascinating to watch, like seeing a machine recalibrate in real time. "I want a divorce," she said finally. "No." "What do you mean, no?" I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks. "I mean, no, Selah. You don't get to cheat on me for months, lie to my face, and then decide how this ends. That's not how this works. Then what do you want? I want you to understand that I know everything. I know about Lyle, I know about the motel, I know about the credit card charges and the fake text messages and all the lies you've been telling. I want you to know that I have evidence of everything, and I'm going to decide what happens next." She took a step back, and for the first time since I'd known her, Selah looked genuinely afraid. "You're scaring me, Dean." "Good. You should be scared, because the man you married, the one who trusted you and believed your lies and let you walk all over him, that man is gone, and you're not going to like his replacement nearly as much." I walked past her toward the garage, stepping over the spilled food. "Clean up this mess," I said without turning around. "We'll talk more tomorrow." I spent the night at Jake's gym, hitting the heavy bag until my hands were raw and my mind was clear. When I got home the next morning, Selah was gone. Her car was in the driveway, but she wasn't in the house. On the kitchen counter, next to a fresh cup of coffee, was a note. "Gone to think. Back tonight. We need to talk." I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. She was right about one thing. We definitely needed to talk. Selah came home that evening with red eyes and a story about spending the day at her sister's house. I listened politely while she explained how confused she was, how she'd made a mistake, how she wanted to work things out. "I ended it with Lyle," she said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table like we were negotiating a business deal. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything." "How long?" I asked. "What?" "How long has it been going on?" She hesitated. "A few weeks." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken of our credit card statement. Romano's, 6 months ago. The hotel charge from February. The gas station receipts. I swiped through the evidence methodically. "Try again." "Dean, how long, Selah?" Her shoulders sagged. 8 months. 8 months. 2/3 of the past year she'd been lying to my face every single day. Coming home to me after being with him, sitting across from me at dinner, lying in bed next to me, all while carrying on with some broke photographer who couldn't even afford his rent. Why? I asked. I don't know. That's not an answer. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You stopped seeing me. We became roommates, not husband and wife. You come home, we eat dinner, we watch TV, we go to bed. When was the last time we really talked about anything? When was the last time you surprised me or took me somewhere special or made me feel like I mattered to you? I considered this. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to feel alive again. With Lyle Denvers, the wedding photographer who's about to be evicted. She looked up, surprised. How do you... Never mind. Yes, with Lyle. And now you want to work things out. Yes. I nodded slowly. Here's what's going to happen, Selah. You're going to call Lyle right now, and you're going to break up with him. Not because you want to save our marriage, but because I'm telling you to. Dean, that's not... You're going to put the call on speaker, and you're going to tell him that your husband found out, and that if he ever contacts you again, I'll make his life very difficult. You can't make me... I slid a manila envelope across the table. Open it. Inside were copies of all the photos I'd taken, along with printouts of credit card statements, phone records, and a detailed timeline of her affair. At the bottom was a letter from my lawyer outlining exactly how a divorce would proceed, including the adultery clause that would leave her with significantly less than half of our assets. I can't make you do anything, I said calmly. But you can choose to cooperate or you can choose to make this difficult. If you make it difficult, everyone will know exactly what kind of person you are. Your law firm, your family, your friends, everyone in this neighborhood. I'll make sure of it. She stared at the papers, her face pale. Make the call, Selah. With shaking hands, she dialed Lyle's number and put the phone on speaker. Hey, beautiful, his voice filled the kitchen. Miss me already? Lyle, we need to talk. Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good. Dean found out. About us. He has pictures. There was a long pause. Pictures? From yesterday, at the motel. He knows everything. Okay, don't panic. We can figure this out. I leaned forward and spoke directly into the phone. Hello, Lyle. Another pause, longer this time. Who is this? This is Dean Calix, Selah's husband, the man whose wife you've been screwing for the past 8 months. Look, man, I didn't know she was married when we first... Yes, you did. You've known from the beginning, just like you knew about the other married women before her. Silence. Here's what's going to happen, Lyle. You're going to hang up this phone and you're never going to contact my wife again. You're not going to call her, text her, email her, or accidentally run into her at the grocery store. If you do, I'll make sure those photos find their way to every wedding photography website in the state. I'll make sure every potential client knows exactly what kind of man they'd be hiring. You can't do that. Try me. I could hear him breathing heavily through the phone. Selah? He said finally. She looked at me, then at the phone. Goodbye, Lyle. She hung up. Good, I said, standing up from the table. Now we can begin. Begin what? I smiled. Your education. The next few weeks were instructive for both of us. I started small. I changed the password on our Netflix account. When Selah asked why she couldn't log in, I told her I was updating our security settings, and I'd give her the new password when I got around to it. I removed her name from our grocery store loyalty account. Suddenly, the discounts she'd relied on for years were no longer available. I had our home Wi-Fi password changed, and I forgot to mention it to her. This is childish, she said, after the third day of trying to connect her laptop. Is it? I was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, drinking my morning coffee. I'm just being more careful about our digital security. You understand the importance of security, don't you, Selah? She understood. I started working late more often, coming home after she'd already eaten dinner. When she asked where I'd been, I said I was grabbing drinks with colleagues, or going to the gym, or just driving around thinking. We need to spend time together if we're going to fix this, she said one evening. Do we? I thought you wanted space. I thought I wasn't seeing you enough. Now I'm giving you all the space you could want. That's not what I meant. Then you should have been more specific. I opened a separate checking account and had my paycheck deposited there. I left just enough in our joint account to cover her basic expenses, but the days of unlimited access to our money were over. The credit card was declined at the store today, she told me, embarrassed. Which store? The department store downtown. I was buying a new dress for the Morrisons' anniversary party. Ah, well, that card has a lower limit now. I'm being more careful about our spending. I need clothes for work, Dean. Of course you do. Make a list of what you need, and we'll discuss it. Make a list, like she was a child asking for allowance. But the most effective lesson came courtesy of Mrs. Henderson and her network of neighborhood gossips. I started taking evening walks around the block, stopping to chat with neighbors I'd barely spoken to in 3 years. I mentioned how stressful things had been lately, how Selah had been working such long hours, how marriage was more challenging than people realized. "Oh, we all go through rough patches," Mrs. Henderson said sympathetically. "Just last month, I was telling Margaret about how I never see Selah's car in the driveway during the day anymore. She's certainly dedicated to her career." "She is," I agreed. "Sometimes I wonder if she's too dedicated, you know? A marriage needs attention from both people." Within a week, I could see the change. The way conversation stopped when Selah walked by. The polite but distant greetings from people who used to be friendlier. The subtle shift in how our neighbors looked at her. Selah noticed too. "Did you say something to Mrs. Henderson?" she asked one evening. "About what?" "She barely spoke to me today, and the Johnsons crossed the street when they saw me coming." "Maybe they were busy?" "All of them?" I shrugged. People are strange sometimes. But I could see it was getting to her. Selah had always cared deeply about what people thought, about maintaining her image as the successful lawyer with the perfect marriage and the beautiful home. Watching that image crumble was clearly more painful than losing access to Netflix. 3 weeks into my education program, she broke. "What do you want from me?" she asked, standing in the middle of our living room like she was giving a closing argument. I ended it with Lyle. I apologized. I've done everything you asked. But you're treating me like a stranger in my own home. Your own home. I looked up from my laptop. Interesting choice of words. Our home, you know what I meant. Do I? Because for the past 8 months, you've been treating this place like a hotel. Somewhere to sleep between visits with your boyfriend. He wasn't my boyfriend. What was he then? She didn't have an answer for that. I've been thinking, I said, closing the laptop, about what you said, about how I stopped seeing you, stopped making you feel special, and you're right. I did stop doing those things. Her face brightened slightly. Dean, but here's the thing, Selah. I stopped doing those things because you stopped being worth the effort. The hope died in her eyes. When we got married, I thought I was getting a partner, someone who would build a life with me, who would have my back when things got tough, who would choose me every day the same way I chose her. Instead, I got someone who took everything I offered and then went looking for more somewhere else. That's not fair, isn't it? You said I made you feel like a roommate. But roommates don't lie to each other. Roommates don't sneak around behind each other's backs. Roommates don't humiliate each other the way you humiliated me. She was crying now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. Just a cold, clear understanding of exactly who she was and exactly what she'd done. I want to fix this, she whispered. No, you don't. You want to go back to the way things were, where you could have everything you wanted without consequences. But that's not going to happen. I stood up and walked toward the stairs. Where are you going? To bed. I suggest you think very carefully about what you really want, Selah, because this is your life now. This is what you chose when you decided to have an affair. For how long? I paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at her. For as long as I decide it should be. 2 months into our new arrangement, Selah made her first real mistake since I'd found out about Lyle. I came home early from work one Thursday afternoon and found her on the phone in our bedroom, speaking in the low, intimate tone I remembered from the early days of our marriage. I know. It's complicated right now, but it won't be forever. She hadn't heard me come in, so I stood in the hallway and listened. He's being impossible, controlling everything, watching everything I do. I can't live like this much longer. A pause. No, I can't just leave. He has those photos, and he's made it clear he'll use them. My career would be over. Another pause, longer this time. I miss you too, more than you know. I pushed the bedroom door open. Selah spun around, her face going white when she saw me. I have to go, she said quickly and hung up. Lyle? I asked conversationally. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. How long has this been going on? Dean, it's not what you think. How long, Selah? 2 weeks. But we haven't seen each other, I swear. It's just phone calls. Just phone calls, as if that made it better. I held out my hand. Give me your phone. What? Your phone. Give it to me. I'm not going to. You have 2 choices. You can give me your phone right now, or you can pack a bag and get out of my house, permanently. She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly handed over her phone. I scrolled through her recent calls. 17 calls to Lyle's number in the past 2 weeks, some lasting over an hour. I checked her text messages and found a treasure trove of the kind of messages that would make excellent evidence in divorce proceedings. Interesting reading, I said, taking screenshots of the most incriminating messages. Especially this one where you talk about how you're going to leave me as soon as you figure out how to neutralize the photos. Dean, and this one where you tell him you love him and you're sorry you ever married me. I looked up from the phone. You know what, Selah? I think it's time we had a real conversation about our future. That evening, I called in some favors. Jake from the gym knew a guy who knew a guy, and by Friday afternoon, I had a comprehensive background report on Lyle Denvers that made for fascinating reading. 3 previous affairs with married women, 2 restraining orders from ex-girlfriends, a bankruptcy filing from 2 years ago, and a current warrant for unpaid child support in Michigan. My buddy Rick from college worked at the local newspaper, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped him move last year. Rick was very interested in the story I had to tell him about a local wedding photographer who specialized in seducing his clients' wives. By Sunday morning, Lyle's business was effectively finished. The story didn't mention him by name, Rick was too professional for that, but it didn't need to. The wedding photography community in our city was small, and word traveled fast. Selah figured out what I'd done by Monday evening. You destroyed him, she said, throwing the newspaper down on the kitchen table. I have no idea what you're talking about. The article about wedding photographers and affairs. Everyone knows it's about Lyle. Do they? How unfortunate for him. He's getting cancellation calls. His business is ruined. Maybe he should have thought about that before he started sleeping with married women. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying justice being served, yes. This isn't justice, Dean. This is revenge. I smiled. Sometimes they're the same thing. That night, Selah packed a bag and went to stay with her sister. She left a note saying she needed time to think, time to figure out what she wanted. I gave her a week. When she came back, she looked different, smaller somehow, like the fight had gone out of her. I want a divorce, she said quietly. I know you do. I'll take whatever settlement you think is fair. I won't fight you on anything. That's very generous of you. I just want this to be over. I nodded. It will be, but not yet. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not ready to let you go yet, Selah. We still have some things to work through. Like what? I smiled. Like making sure you understand exactly what it costs to betray someone who trusted you. The fear was back in her eyes, and I realized I'd grown to like seeing it there. How much longer? She whispered. As long as it takes. Spring turned to summer, and our house became a monument to polite hostility. Selah and I moved around each other like actors in a play neither of us wanted to be in, speaking only when necessary, maintaining the facade of a marriage that had rotted from the inside out. I'd perfected the art of psychological pressure, not enough to be called abuse, but enough to make every day a reminder of what she'd lost and what she'd done. I controlled the money, the social connections, the narrative that our neighbors and friends believed about what had happened to our marriage. Selah, for her part, had become a ghost of herself. The confident, sharp-tongued lawyer I'd married had been replaced by someone who apologized for existing, who asked permission to buy groceries, who jumped every time her phone rang. It should have been satisfying. It should have felt like justice. Instead, it felt empty. The realization hit me on a Tuesday evening in July. I was sitting in my home office reviewing the quarterly reports that had once seemed so important when I heard Selah crying in the kitchen. Not the dramatic, attention-seeking tears she'd shed in the early days after I'd found out about her affair, but quiet, hopeless sobbing that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. I sat there listening, waiting to feel the satisfaction I'd grown accustomed to when she suffered. But instead, I felt nothing. Just a hollow awareness that I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone who took pleasure in another person's pain. I walked to the kitchen and found her sitting at the table, staring at a letter from her law firm. "What's that?" I asked. She looked up, quickly wiping her eyes. "Nothing, just work stuff." I picked up the letter and read it. It was a formal reprimand for her declining performance over the past several months, along with a warning that her position was being reviewed. "When did this start?" I asked. "A few weeks ago. I've been having trouble concentrating, making mistakes." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She'd lost weight. Her clothes hung loose on her frame, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the letter. "Selah, I know what you're going to say, that I brought this on myself, that I deserve whatever happens. And you're right. I do deserve it. But that wasn't what I was going to say. What I was going to say was that I was tired. Tired of being angry, tired of plotting revenge, tired of living in a house that felt like a prison for both of us. I want you to leave, I said instead. She nodded, not looking surprised. Okay, I'll pack tonight. No, I mean permanently. I want a divorce. I know, I've wanted one for months. Then why haven't you filed? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because you told me not to. Because you said you weren't ready. Because I was afraid of what you'd do if I tried to leave before you were finished with me. I sat down across from her at the table, where we'd shared thousands of meals, where we'd planned our future, where I'd confronted her about her affair and started this whole ugly process. I'm finished, I said. What? I'm finished, Selah. With all of it. The games, the punishment, the revenge, I'm done. She stared at me, searching my face for the trap, the trick, the next move in whatever twisted game we'd been playing. I don't understand. I've spent the last 6 months trying to make you pay for what you did to me. And you have paid. We both have. But I look at you now, and I don't see the woman I fell in love with, and I don't see the woman I hated. I just see someone who's broken, and I'm tired of being the one who broke her. Dean, we'll do the divorce quietly. Fair division of assets, no public drama, no more games. You can keep your job, your reputation, your dignity. All I want in return is for you to disappear from my life completely. She was crying again, but these tears were different. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. Why now? She asked. I thought about it. Because I realized that destroying you wasn't going to fix what you broke. It was just going to break me too. We sat in silence for a while, two people who had once loved each other enough to promise forever, now negotiating the terms of goodbye. For what it's worth, she said finally, I am sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because I hurt you. Because I threw away something good for something that meant nothing. I nodded. I know you are. Will you ever forgive me? I don't know. Maybe, but not while we're still married and not while you're still here. She stood up from the table. I'll call a lawyer tomorrow. Okay. Dean? Yeah? I hope you find someone who deserves you, someone who won't make the mistakes I made. I watched her walk upstairs to pack, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The game was over. We'd both lost, but at least now we could stop playing. 3 weeks later, Selah moved out of our house and into an apartment across town. The divorce was finalized 2 months after that, quick and quiet, just like I'd promised. I never saw Lyle again, but I heard through Jake that he'd left town shortly after the newspaper article came out. Apparently, the wedding photography business in our city hadn't recovered from the scandal. I kept the house, most of our assets, and my dignity. Selah kept her job, her reputation, and whatever was left of her self-respect. It wasn't the ending either of us had planned when we said I do 5 years earlier, but it was the ending we'd earned, and sometimes that's the best you can hope for. The moving truck pulled away from the curb on a gray October morning, taking the last remnants of our shared life with it. I stood in the driveway of what was now just my house, watching it disappear around the corner, and realized I felt lighter than I had in years. Mrs. Henderson appeared at her mailbox, clearly hoping for some final piece of gossip to cap off the neighborhood drama. Everything okay, Dean? She called out. Everything's fine, Mrs. Henderson, just fine. And for the first time in a very long time, I actually meant it.